The mainstream media hates Sound of Freedom and thinks it promotes QAnon, because nothing says fringe conspiracy like saying kidnapping children is bad. Welcome to America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. Want to know something that's apparently politically divisive? Child trafficking. You'd think everyone would be against it, but you'd be wrong. Last week on the 4th of July, the indie film Sound of Freedom came out in theaters, and it was a major theatrical success. But the left-leaning mainstream media hated it, probably because they hate Jesus. That wasn't the best Jesus. Hello there. If you didn't know, Sound of Freedom stars actor Jim Caviezel, who also portrayed Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. The film is reportedly based on the true story of Tim Ballard, a former Department of Homeland Security agent who quit his job to save children from human trafficking. The film was finished in 2018 by 20th Century Fox, but Disney shelved it after the two companies merged. The Mormon-founded streaming service Angel Group picked it up years later, which is a little surprising since some would say the Mormon Church funding an anti-child abuse movie is like Ronald McDonald sponsoring an anti-hamburger flick. The whole message of the movie is about how evil and rampant child trafficking is. So this film really shouldn't be politicized. But the left-leaning mainstream media found a way to milk as much outrage as possible. The Rolling Stone called Sound of Freedom a superhero movie for dads with brain worms. The Guardian called Sound of Freedom a QAnon-adjacent thriller that's really just paranoid. And Jezebel called the film an anti-child trafficking fantasy fit for QAnon. I have to say, anti-child trafficking sounds like a great fantasy. Way better than furry environmentalist fantasies, aka the Avatar movies. Almost everyone is connecting Sound of Freedom to QAnon. But why? Is the child trafficker in it Hillary Clinton? And she's sucking their brains out so she and the other lizard people can live forever on their hollow moon base? Because if so, I'd watch the heck out of that movie, and don't lie, so would you. If you don't know what QAnon is, I envy you. QAnon started in 2017 on 4chan when an anonymous post claimed that a government agent called Q had high-level intelligence on a global network of Democrats and Hollywood elites. It alleges that this global network is engaged in Satan-worshipping, pedophilia, and even cannibalism. But don't worry, Donald Trump was waging a clandestine war against a secret cabal during his term in office. Now, you might dismiss that as laughably stupid, but the mainstream media takes it very seriously. They call QAnon a conspiracy theory that has been thoroughly debunked. I mean, a group of elite engaged in pedophilia? That's crazy. Crazy. But now mainstream media is hunting for all sorts of connections between the film and QAnon. They do this by arguing that Sound of Freedom is a gateway to far-right conspiracy theories. One of the biggest gateways is the main star, Caviezel. What's Caviezel's connection to QAnon? I'll get into that after the break. Welcome back. The mainstream media is targeting Sound of Freedom by pointing out how Caviezel went full QAnon. To prove their point, the mainstream media referenced a lot of things Caviezel said in past events. One of those events was the For God and Country Patriot Double Down convention organized by the Patriot Voice in Las Vegas in 2021. It was a QAnon convention, or at least QAnon linked. I'm starting to think being QAnon linked is about as meaningful as calling someone a white supremacist these days. So what QAnon things did Caviezel say there?
We must fight for that authentic freedom and live, my friends. By God we must live, and with the Holy Spirit as your shield and Christ as your sword, may you join Saint Michael and all the angels in defending God and sending Lucifer and his henchmen straight right back to hell where they belong. We are headed into the storm of all storms. Yes, this storm is upon us. But not without Jesus, our rudder. And in the words of Reagan, evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. God bless you.
Man, his pitch for Passion of the Christ 2 sounds super convoluted. I don't remember Reagan in the Bible. Some believe the storm Caviezel referred to was a QAnon reference to the fight in which then President Donald Trump would expose and arrest the secret ring of satanic cannibalistic pedophiles. You know, a conspiracy theory is out there when even Alex, they're turning the frogs gay Jones, is like, that's a bit too far-fetched. Was it a QAnon reference? Well, it might not be as clear as people make it out to be. People online are only focusing on the segment that I showed earlier, and they're coming into it with a lot of preconceptions, such as the idea that Caviezel was calling for violence. Keep in mind that Jesus' version of fighting the devil was hanging out in the desert, meditating and fasting for 40 days. If you actually watch the entire speech, it's clear that Caviezel focused on promoting the Sound of Freedom film, criticizing abortion, and advocated for protecting the Constitution and civil liberties. Speaking as a Catholic, he also called on people to not cater to liberals and to pursue freedom from sin and weakness. He's pretty much advocating for fighting against evil in general, without anything like physical violence, contrary to what many people would have you think. So he wanted to fight evil through nonviolent means? I guess he trained to play Jesus through method acting. Aside from that speech, the 2021 Health Freedom Summit in Tulsa, Oklahoma also gained attention. There, Caviezel mainly focused on promoting Sound of Freedom and the work Ballard was doing to stop child trafficking, but his brief comments about adrenochrome got the mainstream media's attention.
But he's down there saving children as we speak, because they're pulling kids out of the darkest recesses of hell right now, in dumbs and all kinds of places. The adrenochroming of children.
Now, for those of you who don't know what adrenochrome is, congratulations on not spending too much time on the internet. I envy you. Here's Caviezel's explanation.
You said adrenochrome.
Yeah. Essentially, you have adrenaline in your body. I'll just simplify it. And when you are scared, you produce adrenaline. If a child knows he's going to die, his body will secrete this adrenaline.
Adrenochrome is a chemical compound derived from adrenaline. Caviezel elaborated a bit more on what elites want to do with adrenochrome when former Trump advisor Steve Bannon asked what was driving the demand for human trafficking.
Adrenochrome, it's an elite drug that they've used for many years. It's 10 times more potent than heroin, and it has some mystical qualities as far as making you look younger.
Heroin that makes you look younger? If that were true, here's what Keith Richards would look like today. Ironically, according to QAnon, the elites would then go after his adrenochrome. Now, many people point out that Caviezel's comments match what QAnon followers believe when they say that elite networks want to traffic children to consume blood and organs for adrenochrome to extend their lives. QAnon sounds ridiculous, but it's easy to see why some would believe it. For one, it would explain Paul Rudd. How else could a 96-year-old look that dashing? Also, adrenochrome may not be what QAnon people say it is, but it's not, as the Daily Beast would have you believe, an imaginary drug. It even has a Wikipedia page. And there have been cases where children were trafficked for blood. Maybe not among the rich as far as we know, but definitely among Ugandan witches. And organ trafficking is definitely a thing, especially in China. And then there's Jeffrey Epstein. Still waiting on the list of elites who he trafficked minors to. It's not like the mainstream media has ever changed their mind on what was a conspiracy theory before. Like any really good conspiracy, all the pieces make sense. It's how you put them all together that gets weird. Throughout different interviews, it does seem like Caviezel gets the conspiracy side of things mixed in with his Catholic faith when it comes to things like adrenochrome, Ukrainian biolabs, JFK's assassination, and puppeteers such as the International Monetary Fund and the Rothschilds. No mention of him believing the government is turning the frogs gay, though. No wonder Alex Jones doesn't roll with QAnon. So aside from the film's main star Caviezel, the mainstream media is also attacking Caviezel's real-life character, Tim Ballard, who runs Operation Underground Railroad, or OUR, to counter child trafficking, and not for culturally appropriating Harry Tubman by calling it the Underground Railroad, although I'm not 100% sure no one's mad about that. Many accuse Ballard of peddling QAnon conspiracy theories too. The Washington Post reported that Ballard once entertained a viral theory that claimed the online furniture retailer Wayfair was selling children, sometimes packing them into overpriced storage cabinets. Media Matters went further by saying Ballard legitimized the conspiracy story. But that's misleading. At the time, multiple anti-trafficking groups got attention for engaging with the story, not just our. And it's pretty clear that the main focus of Ballard's response was to get support for countering child trafficking, not determining whether Wayfair was really packaging children. Ballard seems to believe, like me, the only thing Wayfair is guilty of is being basic. Ballard saw an opportunity in the way QAnon was drawing attention to child trafficking, but he said that he wanted to provide real information so the facts could be shared. Aside from pointing to potential QAnon ties, many media outlets also raised doubts about the legitimacy of Ballard's organization, especially when there were discrepancies about an alleged kidnapping case in New York City. Now, there's nothing wrong with worrying about whether Operation Underground Railroad exaggerates its role in countering human trafficking. Chances are it does. But it seems the mainstream media is almost too eager to just completely discredit the organization. Media outlets pointed out how Operation Underground Railroad came under investigation for illegally soliciting money, taking false credits for arrests, and other charges. However, 2.5 years later, the investigation closed without any charges pressed. The mainstream media is just focused on the negatives, because in America, it's always guilty until proven innocent or no longer convenient for the narrative. That's justice. But it seems to forget that Ballard was the council co-chair of the Public-Private Partnership Advisory Council to end human trafficking, and that the State Department legitimized his credentials as someone who worked as an undercover agent to infiltrate human trafficking organizations. And almost a decade ago, Operation Underground Railroad got positive public press for a sting operation in Colombia.
This is the table where we're going to do the negotiation.
Less than 24 hours after the operatives landed, the suspected traffickers arrived on the island, and the final deal with the undercover team began. 54 boys and girls aged 11 to 18 were ushered in for what had been billed as a sex party. That transaction was never completed. 25 Colombian special operatives stormed the party, arresting 5 suspects, 4 men and 1 former beauty queen, all charged with child trafficking.
I guess the press angle depends on the current narrative. So Caviezel seems to believe at least some of the QAnon story, and Ballard engaged with it once on social media, along with everybody else. What's in the actual movie? I'll tell you after this short commercial break. Welcome back. The mainstream media is hell-bent on putting Caviezel and his movie down using QAnon, just as it's doing with RFK Jr. and his views about vaccines. Now, you can agree to disagree with Caviezel's opinions, and you can ask questions about Ballard and his organization, but should it really affect whether you enjoy Sound of Freedom as a movie? For a lot of people, no. For the mainstream media, it better. Otherwise, you're a right-wing maniac. Oh, never change, media. Media Matters, for example, makes it seem as though QAnon conspiracies serve as the foundation of Sound of Freedom.
The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking, but that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory.
We know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites.
But wouldn't it be better to over-worry about child trafficking rather than worry too little? Like if I told you that there was one spider in one sandwich in a party platter, shouldn't you warn people to check under the bread before digging in? Especially if that spider was a pedophile? Here I thought I couldn't hate spiders anymore. On top of that, it's a pretty big leap to claim that Sound of Freedom aims to promote QAnon ideas. I guess they're afraid it will encourage more people to believe in QAnon conspiracy theories about pedophile, cannibalistic liberal elites running child trafficking rings for Adrenochrome. But considering that so many people like Sound of Freedom, Connecting the film to QAnon seems that should be the last thing the mainstream media wants to do. That'd be like saying, oh, you like Nirvana? Well, the lead singer was a big fan of heroin, and that stuff is super easy to access and get into. Oh, don't try it, though. Caviezel seems to personally hope that the Sound of Freedom movie will stir people to be more aware of things like adrenochroming and organ harvesting. But Sound of Freedom doesn't depict anything like that, or even the idea that there's a secret ring of pedophile and cannibalistic elites. Even mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post admit that. The film's villains are common criminals, not the shadowy cabal of occultists imagined by QAnoners. The Guardian likewise admits there's no scaremongering in the film, though it tries to argue that it lurks in the shadows. Yes, they're afraid a movie might make you think about things not in the movie. Still, some insist that QAnon is definitely represented in the film somehow. One such example is when butterflies appeared on screen. Some assume that these must be a reference to the QAnon conspiracy about the National Butterfly Center being connected to human trafficking. Sounds like paranoid delusions. I'm beginning to think the mainstream media is as insane as QAnon. On the bright side, with all its success, maybe we will get that Sound of Freedom sequel with Hillary and the Lizard People on their hollow moon base. Seriously, you know you'd watch it. So what do you think of Sound of Freedom? Did you watch the film? Leave your comments below. And remember that we rely mainly on direct support from viewers like you. If you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, all it takes is as little as $1 per episode over on our crowdfunding website, Patreon. Visit patreon.com/America Uncovered for more. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.